I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary. Welcome to Super Dwarf Sunday for March 5th, 2023. This was not my planned episode. The content of this episode is because of an antic that TC pulled this week. Actually, maybe it's more my antic. You'll see when the video starts playing. But I got video footage of a little incident that TC and I had this week. And since that time, TC's not been in his enclosure because I took his enclosure apart not only to look for him, but to clean it. And I've been so busy with other things that I haven't had time to finish cleaning and putting it back together. So TC, for the last couple of days, has been hanging around this activity station and inside this exercise tent. And he has actually been quieter and more content in this exercise tent than he is in his enclosure. He woke up last night and he poked his head out of his humid hide, and he came out of his humid hide and he got a drink, and then he just hung out in here for the evening, for the night, and didn't do anything, didn't try to get out. And then he slept all day today. And so this evening, just a little while ago, he was at the zipper, sort of cruising around the zipper, but not really trying to force his way out the way he does from his enclosure. So I think he actually likes the exercise tent and maybe the fresh air and the openness of it better than his actual PVC enclosure. However, an exercise tent with mesh walls in Colorado is not good for a Super Dwarf Retic because humidity is a problem. Now, because I knew that he was going to hang out in there for a day or two, I did put his humidity box in there with his damp sphagnum moss, and he's actually been sleeping in there and using it. So TC's going to come out for some exercise. I'll try to get his PVC enclosure cleaned and put back together tonight so that he can go back in it. But until then, watch this video and let me know what you think in the comments. Well, hi everyone, it's Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary. Welcome to Super Dwarf Sunday for March 5th, 2023. I am flustered today, and this episode's content is not what I initially intended for it to be about. Things are in disarray in this room. Things are in disarray in my entire house and office because last night I let TC out of his enclosure because he was asking to come out, and I laid down to take a nap for about 45 minutes. And when I got up from my nap, I couldn't find TC. Now that in itself is not unusual because TC moves around, and the rooms that he has access to are snake proof for a snake his size and for a snake the size of my two Bredli that are allowed to roam around. However, as time went by and I did not hear him or see him roaming around, I started to wonder where he had gotten to. And then I went out and fed horses, I did schoolwork, and I just did my normal work that I do throughout the night. And by the time that I was ready to go to bed this morning around 5 a.m., I still had not seen or heard TC. So I was a little bit stressed about that because that's highly unusual. And before I went to bed, I looked in places that he would normally not be, and I looked in unusual places that I didn't think he could get to. And I even looked in the 3 rooms that the snakes are not allowed to go into because they're not snake proofed. We have 3 rooms that are blocked off from the snakes getting into because I haven't gotten them snake proof. The rest of the rooms that they do have access to, the drains are covered, the vents are covered, there's no outdoor access. There's really no place that they can go to get out of those rooms or get out of the house or get hurt for a snake their size. So a Super Dwarf Reticulated Python and an adult Bredl's Python. So I looked in these 3 rooms where they're not allowed to be, and I didn't see TC or any sign that he'd been in there. So I thought, okay, there's no way that he could have gotten into these rooms. And I just trusted that he had probably just wanted out but didn't want to roam because he'd eaten not too long ago and he was probably sleeping somewhere. So I got up today. This stuff is all where it's not supposed to be. So I got up today expecting that I would see evidence that he had been roaming around. And I saw my 2 Bredl's Pythons, one sleeping in an area where she commonly sleeps during the day, Sunspear, and then I saw Boreth sleeping on top of a heat mat in a location that I leave out for them in case they need heat while they're out roaming, but I couldn't find TC. So I started going about my normal day, but right before it's time for me to go out and feed horses, I just started to get a little panicked that I couldn't find him. It had been, I don't know, 12 hours at this point. I just couldn't find him. So now I start moving furniture. I start moving enclosures away from the walls. Not because there's anything he could get hurt on. I just wanted to know where he was because the behavior was unusual. It was unusual that he wasn't visible and that he wasn't moving around and that I didn't see him. And I was really at the end of my rope. I was starting to make myself sick and get panicky and exhausted. And at about 15 hours, when I absolutely need to go out and feed the horses, I moved these last few things away from the wall in this room. And I'll show you in a minute. And I didn't find TC, but TC found me. He started to come out in curiosity about what I was doing from the location that he had found to rest in, which was underneath another enclosure, in between the bottom of that enclosure and the stand that it was on. And it's such a small space. I absolutely don't know how he squished under there. But he's just happily coiled up under there resting, and he stuck his head and neck out, and he started to come towards me, tongue flicking, to see what I was doing. So let me show you what the room looks like and what some of the stuff looks like that I did take apart to try to look for him. I even looked for him in his enclosure thinking, well, maybe for some odd reason he went back into his enclosure, which he would never do because he always wants out of his enclosure. But I even looked in there. So let me show you. So not trusting myself to miss something, I took the doors off of his enclosure and I ransacked it. So he wasn't in there. I looked in spots like this between the Zen habitats. I looked underneath things where that I have covering lights. I mean, I looked in all of the normal spots where a snake might potentially be. I ended up moving enclosures away from the wall so that I could look behind them, because snakes do like to squish between the wall and the enclosure sometimes. So I moved all of that. I got up on this step stool to look way up high to see if maybe he had squished between that and the ceiling. I opened up every cabinet and emptied them out. This is a cabinet that stores dishes for the dogs and bowls for the snakes and dogs. But I emptied out every cabinet. Now, cabinets are not dangerous for him, but I was determined to find out where he was. He wasn't in any cabinets. I took everything out of all of the exercise tents that I currently have set up with cardboard boxes and things, thinking maybe he was inside there and I just couldn't see him or hear him moving around. So I drug everything out of here. I looked in boxes where he shouldn't have even been, like boxes that were closed that still have things in them, like cat food. I looked everywhere I could think of around my office. I moved these enclosures away from this wall to look behind them. I took drawers. This is not even a room that the snakes go in, but I thought, well, maybe he came in here. I mean, they're allowed in here, but they just, for some reason, usually don't come in here, I think, because this is where a lot of the dog kennels are. So I took drawers out of stuff to look under the drawers. I looked in closets. I looked on the floor. I looked on the ceiling. I looked in the normal climbing spaces where they're allowed to be, thinking maybe I just missed him. I looked in the trash cans. I emptied every piece of trash out of all of the trash cans in the house, thinking, well, maybe he is in there because he does like to get in this bucket, and I have found him in the bottom of this bucket before, which is where I have things stored like sphagnum moss. He wasn't in any of this stuff. There's Sunspear, by the way, in one of the spots where she normally is. So not unusual there. She's always easy to find. So anyway, I think you're probably getting the idea by now. I was just panicked because I didn't know where he was. None of these rooms that he has access to have anything normally harmful to him, or places that I know of where he could get out or anything like that. I just got to the point where I thought something had happened to him because he wasn't visible. I didn't hear him moving around. He wasn't doing the things he normally does when he's loose. And I was determined that I wanted to know where he was, so I started tearing things apart. And I found him, and I'm relieved, but I think he's going to be grounded. Absolutely, I feel like his free roaming privileges are revoked unless I am physically awake and watching him. And if I'm going to take a nap or go out to the barn, I'm going to put him in an exercise tent, because, or I'm going to put him in one of the smaller rooms that is snake proof that I can shut the door and they can't get out of, just so that I for sure absolutely know where he is, because he really caused me a lot of stress and anxiety over the last 15 hours. So I took some pictures and I think I took some video of when I found him. But a point I want to make, well, let me show you where I found him and that stuff, and then at the end, I want to make a point about this. TC is in this picture. Can you pick him out? TC, you have literally made me ill. Do you know that? I don't know how you even fit under there. But I'm physically sick now because I haven't been able to find you in almost 24 hours. I guess that's not true. Since 9 o'clock last night. And I guess it's only 2 in the afternoon, so that's not quite 24 hours, but still. Why would you squish under there? Can you even get out? That's ridiculous. You've really stressed me out. You're in big trouble. Upset with you. You've probably lost your privileges to free roam as soon as you come out from there. Not probably, for sure. Here's the point that I just want to make. It's a behavioral observation that in the midst of my sort of panicky feeling and anxiety that I discovered, that I thought was interesting, is as I'm doing all this and looking for TC, you know, some of the dogs avoided what I was doing. And they're like, I don't know what mom's doing. A couple of them actually put themselves into their kennels and just went to sleep. And then, of course, I had a few that were right in the middle of what I was doing. They had to get under my feet. They had to put their noses in the cabinets and in all of these places I was looking, and they had to get behind the enclosures and sniff. And TC, instead of hiding from me as I got into this corner of the room where he ended up being at rest, you know, some snakes would just avoid you and would just stay where they are, or even hide further. Or if they were moving around, stop moving around. But TC did the opposite. I was moving stuff around in the vicinity of where he was resting. I didn't know where he was. And he came out. And he got into my space. And he started tongue flicking me and investigating what I was doing. So he actually came out to see what I was doing as I was looking for him. And I just think that that illustrates the point that some animals are neophobic and also avoid changes and things that are unusual in their environment. So they tend to avoid new things or be cautious and shy of new things, and they tend to avoid change and be cautious of changes happening around them. And other animals are neophilic or bold and curious, meaning that if there's something new going on or in the environment, they're going to investigate it and be curious about it. And if there's changes happening in the environment and disturbances going on, that animal is going to be right in the middle of it to see what's going on. And so just like some of the dogs avoided what I was doing and others got right in the middle of it, TC got right in the middle of what I was doing when I got into the area where he was resting. And that's actually how he found me. I didn't find him. I would have never, ever looked in that spot where he was, because I thought, there is no way that he could possibly squeeze between the bottom of that enclosure and the top of the one it is sitting on, but somehow he did. But the only reason that I discovered him is because he came out and found me because he's curious. And he had to get right in the middle of what I was doing, which is pretty typical of him. It was a pretty good tactic, but I didn't plan to do that. What I did plan to do is this evening, when I finished chores with the horses and other things, was to thaw some food, some rodents or quail, because when I do that, he always shows up. It doesn't matter if he's 3 rooms away. I could be in one end of the facility and he could be in the other end. And once I've thawed the food, or even start thawing the food, suddenly there he is right in the middle of where I have the food. So that was what I was going to do tonight, but I didn't have to go that far because he came out to investigate all of the activity and all of the things that I was doing, moving stuff around. So there you go. Time is it now? 7 p.m.?
7:06.
And he's out. I don't know at what point he came out all the way in here.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't get him out from where I found him unless we lifted the enclosure off of him. I figured he would just come out on his own. I was going to thaw food because I knew he'd for sure come out then. But I wonder if he smelled the soup.
Maybe.
Yeah, if I can't know where he is and watch him, he's going to have to go in a contained space.
That's good.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching and joining me this month for another episode of Super Dwarf Sunday. I feel exhausted, and I think part of my exhaustion this week is due to TC and what he put me through when I couldn't find him. And again, I want to emphasize that the rooms that he had access to were 100% snake proof and perfectly safe. There was nowhere that he could have gotten out to. I guess my anxiety was just that what if something fell on him? What if he was sick and I didn't realize it? What if, you know, just something happened and he was passed out or unconscious, or he was laying somewhere with something pinning him down and I didn't know it. And that's why after about 15 hours, I decided that I absolutely wanted to at least know where he was. And he hides lots of times after he's done roaming underneath things, and he sleeps in tight spaces where I can't see him, but at least I know where he is. And that is my whole thing. I just want to know where the snakes are. And knowing that they're in a safe room isn't enough for me. I want to know where they're at in that safe room, so that if for some reason something happens, like a fire or we have to evacuate suddenly, I know where to go to get the snake out. And so maybe I'm just overprotective and I overreacted and I destroyed my house looking for a snake that was perfectly safe and sleeping the whole entire time. I didn't know where he was. And that spot where I found him was literally only a few feet from his enclosure. So he threw a fit, wanted out of his enclosure, came out of his enclosure, went a few feet across the room to sleep coiled up under another snake's enclosure for the day. So thanks for that, TC. Thank you guys all for joining us again this month. And until next time, everybody, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.